We'll be joined next by our Sixers insider Paul Hudrick from 97.3 ESPN.com. Sixers coverage being brought to you by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com. Sixers back in action, a back-to-backer tonight, 8 o'clock here on 97.3 ESPN. Joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, as promised, he is Paul Hudrick. Paul, how you doing today?
Josh? I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm feeling even better after the game last night because I was asking the question yesterday, what are we going to learn about this team on a night with no Embiid and no Simmons? The first thing I learned is, man, that Tobias Harris guy is pretty special and pretty important to this basketball team, Paul.
Absolutely. And I wrote it as part of my takeaways today for 97.3 ESPN.com was just, it was like quietly great. And the way he did it, he missed his first 5 shots. And instead of keep chucking it up there, firing up mid-range shots or threes, he made a concerted effort to get to the basket. He tried to dunk it on someone's head. He got to the free throw line. I think he took 8 free throws in the first half. And you saw that got him going. And then from there, he misses his first 5, then makes 8 out of his next 10. He scored 11 in the third quarter. I thought he kind of took the game over on that end. Aside from Matisse Thybulle hitting a bunch of threes apparently. But I thought Tobias Harris, it was just a game that just shows you, one, to your point, Josh, how valuable he is. And 2, just how confident he's playing and the good headspace he's in and just that decisive basketball that Doc Rivers talked about all season. We saw that come to fruition against the Bulls in a big way.
The other thing I was wondering about the game last night was I was curious to find out what is going to tell us about the rest of the team. And I think most people rational know this team still needs something. They still need a little bit more depth, a little bit more help. Obviously, they come in a lot of different forms. But the one thing I did learn was that when it comes to the big man position, Bradley, Howard, they got the depth. They maybe need more depth on the wing, but they at least got the big man backup situation on lockdown.
It's funny because, back when they traded for Tony Bradley, that was the Desire Smith deal. They sent him to Detroit. Detroit wound up buying him out. And Tony Bradley came here. He never played a game for the Pistons. He came in over from a trade from the Jazz. But when that happened, we were all kind of like, well, that's like, just why? Like, why would you do this deal? And it seemed to be the simple case of, Daryl Morey, Elton Brand, and all, in the front office valued the idea of having a solid third center over having a guy who is still very much, Zaire Smith's not even playing in the league. He's just a very, projectable guy. He wasn't, he never really came to fruition his that first round status. So to get a guy like Tony Bradley, who is still, he just turned 23 a couple months ago, still a young guy, has some promise. When you look at some of his advanced analytical stats, going back to his days in Utah, you saw some of it and you see what he has. He's really long. He is athletic. He's when he has that energy and he has that hustle about him, you see what he brings to the table. And it was interesting. Doc Rivers mentioned that he lost 25 pounds since the start of the season. And apparently that's been something for Tony Bradley that's kind of been an issue throughout, not only just his NBA career, but even going back to his time at UNC. So this is a guy that I think is just kind of maturing and growing up. And yeah, he looks like a legitimate NBA backup big. And then Dwight Howard, obviously turning back the clock again. Just every once in a while, he kind of has those glimpses back to those Superman days, especially against a team like the Bulls that really they just, as we saw Joel Embiid drop 50 points on them, they just have no answers for true centers and for guys who kind of bully them. And I thought Bradley and Dwight Howard did an excellent job taking advantage of that all night.
Yeah, there's like 1 or 2 plays there where Howard got the ball and he saw that Lauri Markkanen was on him. He was just like, let's go. I'm going to destroy you, little boy. Like, he just had this look in his eye like, you're not stopping me. Who do you think you are, Lauri Markkanen?
That drop step, that one drop step he had, and then that dunk finish, that's vintage. Like, that's the stuff we saw him do in Orlando very often. Probably can't go to it as much as he would like now, but again, against a guy like Lauri Markkanen, he for sure has that in his bag.
Paul Hudrick joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline inside the Sixers here on 97.3 ES. Usually at 3:20, but college basketball happened, so Paul was kind enough to bump down to the 5 o'clock hour here on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill. Paul, now that we know what this team looks like without Embiid and Simmons, And it's against the Bulls, I understand, but they're still at least a competitive basketball team. They're not a garbage team. What does this say to you about, you wrote the article on the website about the primer, the 10 guys they could target. Now that we saw a game where it looks like without Simmons and Embiid, what have you learned about what the Sixers need? Because, Daryl Morey, we know he's going to make a deal. We know he's going to do something. But what did we learn about what the Sixers are going to need after the game last night?
Well, I still think they need scoring. I still think they need shot creation, a guy that can get his own shot off the dribble. I still think that would probably be the one thing that I would really want to look at if I'm Daryl Morey. I know a lot of people have talked about stretch five, but to me, I kind of see it. We've seen what Ben Simmons can do in those stretches where he's played that small ball five role, where he runs the pick and roll and could do some things defensively. It makes them kind of really switchable 1 through 5 almost when he's on the floor playing the 5. So I don't think that stretch 5 role is it's not as crucial to me as again a playmaking guard. And again, you talk about wings. I think they're in pretty good shape too. When you see how Matisse Thybulle has been playing defensively, and then last night Cannon 3 threes last night. I think on the wing, I think they're okay. I even think at the 4, again in a playoff series when your bench is shortened, you have Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris that can both play the 4, and Mike Scott really for now who can give you a couple minutes. You don't want to overextend him. You don't want to rely on him too much. But I think they have some of those pieces. So I think to me the biggest thing they could use is a playmaking guard. And there are guys out there. We've heard a lot of the names. Will Barton was the newest one. Guys like George Hill, DeLon Wright, all those kind of guys I think would be a huge boost. The way I look at it, with no disrespect to Furkan Korkmaz, who played extremely well last night, I think if you can get a guy like Will Barton, that's a huge upgrade to come off your bench with a guy who's just a little bit more consistent, can give you a little bit more off the dribble, and can give you a little bit more defensively, and just has flat out more experience. So I think that's where I'm looking the biggest. Of course, if you can land a Kyle Lowry, you have to explore that. But I don't think they necessarily need to get that big fish. I think if they're unable to land a guy like Lowry, I think they can make a couple smaller moves and be right there in the conversation for the Eastern Conference.
For the Sixers, do we read anything extra into the fiasco going on in Houston with PJ Tucker?
Just that he clearly wants to get the hell out of there. That's very obvious, but he's made that known since before the season started. Anyone who's been following that along, even when James Harden was unhappy, obviously him and James Harden are very close. They both had a good relationship with Daryl Morey. They saw the direction the team was going, where quite frankly they're not good and they're not trying to win right now. So PJ Tucker isn't getting any younger, so he wants to go to a place where he can contend, whether that is the Sixers, whether that's the Brooklyn Nets, or the Milwaukee Bucks, any of those teams. And to me, if anything, this hurts Houston's leverage, so that could help the Sixers in a way. This also could result. Listen, this might ultimately result in, if Houston doesn't get a good offer, it might result in PJ Tucker eventually being bought out. So if that happens, that would be huge for the Sixers, because they have a lot going for them as a contender. As a guy, with PJ Tucker, he already has that relationship with Morey, as I mentioned, and then they have that taxpayer MLE where they can maybe offer him, a scotch more than that veteran minimum and maybe lure him here. So it's a pretty big deal that he is not going to play, and that he's clearly on his way out of Houston.
Paul, one more before we let you go. Obviously, Sixers basketball tonight, 8 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. Check out the full trade primer that Paul wrote over at 97.3 ESPN.com. I see that Embiid is probable for tonight. We expect Simmons will not be back until, Sunday, right? So what is the latest on those two fronts?
Yeah, so it looks like all systems go for Joel Embiid, barring something unforeseen between now and tip-off. It looks like he is going to play. Which it's funny, Josh, because thinking back when we all heard the news about Embiid and Simmons, I think there was a lot of doom and I get it. There was a lot of doom and gloom from fans, like, oh man, here we go, for their first seed in the East, and now coming out of the break, they're missing their best 2 players. So and I totally understood it, and my thought was, you know what, win 1 out of 2, and you had a good chance because Embiid was coming back, and as you alluded to, Simmons will be back, should be back Sunday, so you'll have your full complement then. But I thought the best case scenario was, okay, win 1 out of 2. It was going to be really hard. But now, quite frankly, now that you won the game in Chicago without both, now that you have Joel Embiid in DC, they should win both. I mean, quite frankly, and just thinking back on how big that is compared, again, the doom and gloom we all kind of felt coming into after the break, because both those guys are going to be out, to now it's okay. Now they have a shot to win both of these games. And now they'll get the full complement back Sunday at the Wells Fargo Center with fans. So, I think it's that win just really it starts the second half on such a better note than maybe we would have thought it would had they lost and had they, without those two guys and the precedent that might have set. But instead, it's a really big win. It's a really positive note to start off on.
And don't forget, when they return Sunday, they are back at home with fans in the building. I guarantee you, even if it's only a couple thousand, they're going to be loud as you know what on Sunday, and they're going to feed off of that crowd. You hear that game also here on 97.3 ESPN. He's Paul Hudrick, Inside the Sixers, here on 97.3 ESPN at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Coming in for a landing is the podcast. Check out his NBA trade primer at 97.3 ESPN.com. And as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline and live in the virtual flesh on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Paul, great stuff today.
Thanks, Josh. Talk to you soon, man.
Josh Hennig here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Again, our coverage of Sixers basketball being brought to you by Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, South Jersey's premier sports rehabilitation and physical therapy center, treating the pros and the Joes. Visit them online at trifectatherapeutics.com.